So we're gonna check out this video from Seth Fowler. It's top 10 most comfortable Air Jordan retro sneakers. Now, I have a number of sneakers. Disclaimer, I do not like most Air Jordans. Probably don't like the ones, don't even want the ones, don't even plan on buying the ones or acquiring the ones. But there's some from the ones to about the 14s. There's some that are sprinkled in there that I really do like, but after that, it's just kind of like, I don't really like them. The number one reason is because of the look. And then we just go basically from there. So let's check out what Seth Fowler has to say about this. I think this is really interesting.
I've worn all of these silhouettes in a bunch of different colorways, but I've never sat down and tried to figure out which one is the most comfortable. And to be honest, I've always wondered, so today we're gonna figure it out. This is the top 10 most comfortable Air Jordan retros. Yes, I know there's 14 of them, but we're gonna have 4 different honorable mentions. Starting things off with the 4th honorable mention, and unfortunately, the least comfortable shoe on today's list, we've got my favorite sneaker of all time, the Air Jordan 1. So I guess it stands to reason that the Air Jordan 1 is the least comfortable shoe on the list. It was the first shoe to release back in 1985, and it features the least amount of cushioning technology. That said though, from a personal point of view, I've worn the Jordan 1 so much, I'm just used to it. I think it feels great on foot, especially after you've worn the shoe for a couple times. But I do understand from a...
Let's get it right, Seth. And you can answer to this. It's the nostalgia, is the way that it looks and that people wear this thing. It's nothing special about it to me. Nothing special. Not at all. Let's go.
A purely objective point of view, how this shoe could be considered the least comfortable. I mean, all you've really got for comfort is a very thin Zoom Air unit in the heel of the shoe, which I've never even noticed personally. But I actually think it's better than a pair of Vans, and people wear Vans all the time, so I really don't understand the hate on this shoe in terms of comfort. I think it's just fine. The upper of the shoe is reasonable. It comes in a lot of cases leather, which feels fine on foot and does break in over time. Depending on the kind of leather that you get, some leathers are very stiff, usually the better leathers, and some leathers are very soft and flimsy, usually the worst leathers. In the case of the Chicago Lost and Founds, the upper is fine. It's really nicely padded around the ankle area. The toe box is leather, with not really any padding going on there, so if you don't mind the way that feels on your foot, you're gonna be fine with this shoe. I think the best word to use when describing the comfort of the Air Jordan 1s is basic. I mean, that's really what it is. It's the first Air Jordan model, the first time that Jordan Brand ever put an Air unit in a pair of Air Jordans, obviously because it is the first Air Jordan. That's why they called it Air Jordan, because it had an Air unit in it. And I hate to say it, but compared to the other Jordans on this list, it is probably the least comfortable, objectively. But again, I would wear this over every shoe on the list because I love the Jordan 1. The 3rd honorable mention and the 2nd least comfortable shoe on today's list is the Air Jordan 6. So I wore all 14 of these shoes, basically 14 days in a row, to determine which one was the most comfortable. And then on the last day, I kind of compared all of them by trying them on side by side, one on one foot, one on the other foot. It was a whole big process. And to my surprise, the Air Jordan 6, the 6th Air Jordan sneaker, there are 5 more before this shoe, was the 2nd least comfortable shoe. You'd think after 5 versions of the Air Jordan shoe that the 6 would be higher on the list, but in my opinion, it's not that comfortable. The main cushion on this shoe is the visible air unit that you can see in the heel. However, it's surrounded by this really stiff rubber that does not allow it to compress that much. And then when you move forward to the front of the shoe, it's just really stiff underfoot, like genuinely pretty similar to the Air Jordan 1s in my opinion. Now to be fair, everyone's feet are different. I'm gonna be saying this a lot throughout the video, so everyone might have different thoughts and opinions when it comes to comfortable Jordan retros, but in my opinion, this is the 2nd worst. And then when you pair that with an upper that's relatively stiff and doesn't move that well with your foot, it's not that comfortable of an experience. I will say that it is one of the more well-ventilated Air Jordan models, and you can tell from all the ventilation holes in the side of the shoe, which actually don't do as much as you would think. But to be honest, none of the shoes on this list are really that well ventilated, so it's kind of just the best of a bad situation. Does it look good though? Yes, I do like the way the sneaker looks, and yes, I do wear the Air Jordan.
Well, you don't. You don't prop the shoe up that much when you say it's the best of a bad situation. Not familiar with the shoe from wearing it, but come on, y'all. Comfort is, that's the second most important thing. in my opinion. Comfort. Looks, then comfort. And then we just derive everything from there. We derive from durability and, all of these type of things. So we'll continue.
Jordan 6 a decent amount, even though this is actually the only pair that I have in my size currently. It's also the only non-OG colorway that I have in today's video because I literally don't have any other Air Jordan 6 colorways, but it's a good shoe. It's just not that comfortable. The second honorable mention and the third least comfortable pair of Air Jordan sneakers, in my opinion, is the Air Jordan 3. Now, this was really tough for me because I wear this shoe all the time. In my opinion, it's a pretty comfortable shoe, and when I did research regarding which shoe was the most comfortable before I actually wore all of them, this was pretty consistently considered the most comfortable on Reddit message boards, on Twitter, all across the internet. But in my opinion, it's not as comfortable as people think. I mean, it should kind of make sense because it's one of the earlier Air Jordan models. There's not a huge amount going on tech-wise. You do have a visible air unit, which is the first time you actually had a visible air unit on a pair of Air Jordan sneakers. This is the Tinker Hatfield Special. It's probably my second favorite Air.
So with this particular shoe, I first wore this shoe when I was really playing basketball a lot. I'm talking about 4, 5, 6, maybe longer than that, hours a day. And it was my favorite shoe, but that shoe was the original version. This video talks about the retro version. So I can't really talk about the retro version. Excuse me for that. I really can talk about the original version, which was, I thought at the time that it was the most comfortable shoe that I had at that time. And I had a few shoes. I have way more shoes now than I do, than I did back then. Now, the original version is probably something that they took a little more time to do this and to do that. But the technology you would think that you would put more tech into retro versions to make them more comfortable, and of course the price go up and you would justify that price. I don't know. I'm just saying. Back then, I thought this, and I had one of the original colorways. It was black, mostly black with hints of red, original Chicago Bulls colorway. And so yeah, these were one of the shoes that I played in. I mean, we're talking about Friday 4 hours, Saturday 4 hours, Sunday 2-3 hours because I had to go back to work on Monday. But when these shoes came out, and today I don't know. I just haven't really wanted to even purchase any of them. I don't know why. I think, you know what though? I think it's because I have some Air Flight 89s. I have some black Air Flight 89s, and the cushion setup is very similar to this. The style on these is 1,000 times better than the Air Flight 89, but the cushion setup is similar, so I don't know. I might get some of these in the future because I think the sneaker game is getting to a point to where most of the sneakers are going to be for retail, because during the pandemic, the sneakers were way overpriced and they were just ridiculous. But I think it's getting to a point to where I will buy them at retail. But let's continue.
Air Jordan model of all time behind the Air Jordan 1s, but in terms of underfoot comfort, it's lacking. Yes, the Air Jordan 3 does feature a 4-foot air unit, but you don't feel it. Sure, the upper is relatively well padded, and you can wear this shoe all day. I mean, you can wear all of these shoes all day, but it just isn't that soft underfoot. And I get it. A lot of you guys are gonna be mad in the comments. I totally understand. I would have thought that this shoe would have been higher on the list before I tried all of these sneakers, but after literally trying them all on for 14 days and then trying them side by side, this one just didn't make the cut. This is a shoe that I love personally. Please don't hate me for this, but I just don't think it's that comfortable compared to the other 11 shoes I'm about to talk about. Still think it's a great shoe though, and it's more comfortable than a pair of Vans, and the Jordan 1s, and the Jordan 6s. Then the final honorable mention that unfortunately did not make the list is the Air Jordan 4. Comfort-wise, this shoe is very similar to the Air Jordan 3s. In my opinion, the only reason this shoe edges out the Air Jordan 3s is because the upper is just a bit more padded. It also is a little bit more ventilated, however the ventilation panels on the sides of the shoe and on the toe don't do as much as you would hope, but it is a slightly more comfortable shoe. When it comes to cushioning on the Air Jordan 4, you've got a visible air unit on the heel encased in foam, which is, it's kind of soft underfoot. You've also got a 4-foot air unit, which I'll be honest, I don't really feel. In my opinion, this shoe does offer a bit more arch support than the Air Jordan 3s, which I liked, and there's also more padding around the ankle area, so all around I'd say that this shoe is a bit more comfortable than the Air Jordan 3s, but it's still not that comfortable. It's crazy because my top 3 Jordan sneakers of all time did not make the actual list. This is number 3 on the list for me. It's the 1s, the 3s, and the 4s, and then we...
Alright, this says top 10 most comfortable Air Jordan retro sneakers. You're telling us up to this point the ones that are not really comfortable, but I think I know where you're going with this, so we'll continue.
We move on to some other sneakers, which we'll talk about later. But I really think when you stack it up against other Jordan retros, it does not make the cut, and that pains me to say, but unfortunately, the last honorable mention. But now let's move into the official top 10 list. And starting off the list at number 10 is the Air Jordan 5. The Air Jordan 5 is one of those models that goes in and out of popularity very, very quickly. Jordan Brand releases a bunch of them and then just stops releasing them, and you don't really know exactly when the next pair of Air Jordan 5s is coming out. And because of that, I don't think as many people have Air Jordan 5s as they have 4s or 3s. And while the underfoot cushioning setup of this shoe is pretty similar to the Air Jordan 4s and the Air Jordan 3s, which makes sense because those shoes released a year or two before this shoe, it's a little bit better on foot, and the upper of this shoe is significantly more comfortable than both of those shoes. Sure, the shoe features a 4-foot air unit like the Air Jordan 4 and the Air Jordan 3, but it's a little bit lower to the ground, so you don't really feel it. However, the upper of this shoe is incredibly well padded, especially around the ankle area. There is so much plush padding goodness going on, it just feels like a pillow on your foot, which I understand some people might not love, but I do think overall this shoe is a much more comfortable shoe than the 4s or the 3s. Okay, maybe much is an overstatement, but still, it is more comfortable than both of those shoes. Aesthetically, this shoe might not be as good looking as those shoes, and in my opinion, it's not one of my top 5 favorite Jordan models. Maybe it's the number 5 spot, I don't know. But still, a relatively comfortable on-foot experience, albeit not the most comfortable shoe in the world. And ventilation wise, it's fine. A bit better than the 4s, but not exceptional. Number 9, the Air Jordan 8. The Air Jordan 8 is one of the more polarizing shoes on this list, and while it's a very well-loved and liked Air Jordan retro, I can understand why some people might not like the way the sneaker looks. The marquee feature of this shoe are the straps that wrap across the top of the laces, and in my opinion are somewhat unnecessary and also make the shoe a bit more difficult to get into. In fact, I'd say that this shoe is probably the most difficult to get into pair of Air Jordan sneakers out there, because I mean realistically you really have to undo the straps and then loosen the laces, and this whole process, especially when the shoe is brand new, can be a pain to get into, but once it breaks in, it gets better. I also forgot to mention that another thing that doesn't help getting into this shoe is the internal booty construction, which essentially means that there is basically a padded sock inside the shoe, which yes, feels good on your foot, but man, is it difficult to slide your foot in without pressing down part of it, whether it's the heel part or the tongue. You can just kind of step on the wrong thing and have some issues, but all around, still a pretty comfortable shoe. And to be honest, a lot of that does have to do with the internal booty construction. It's very well padded, it's very soft, it really hugs your foot nicely, especially when you lock down these straps. And when it comes to underfoot comfort, you've actually got 2 air units, one in the forefoot and one in the heel. And while they're not as soft as some of the other shoes that we'll talk about in the list, obviously, because this shoe is nowhere near the top of the list, they are pretty comfortable underfoot. The main downside for me for this shoe, and the reason this shoe was lower on the list than I think it could have been, is the fact that this shoe is so incredibly hot on foot. The hottest shoe on the list, in my opinion by far. Not only is there just a lot going on in the upper and not really any ventilation, you've got this internal booty ankle thing going on which doesn't offer any kind of ventilation, and it's just a warm, hot shoe. And even wearing this shoe for like an hour, you get hot. And especially in the summer, man, it's a warm experience. So maybe not a summer shoe, but other than that, it's pretty comfortable. I mean, really, the air units, fine underfoot. The padding, really nice on this shoe, but the heat is a problem. And while the design of this shoe is polarizing, you can't deny how iconic this sneaker is, especially in this playoff colorway. It's beautiful, the Bugs Bunnies are beautiful. A lot of really great looking pairs of Air Jordan 8s are out there, and there's a lot of good options when it comes to grabbing this shoe. So don't write this shoe off just because you might not love the paneling on the upper of this shoe. Definitely worth trying out. Number 8, the Air Jordan 9. In my opinion, the Air Jordan 9 is a great looking silhouette. It's one of those shoes that you can throw on and it looks crispy. I don't know if crispy is the right way to describe the Air Jordan 9, but that's just what I thought of. That was the first word that came to my head. The upper of this shoe is pretty well padded. Ventilation is fine. You really only get ventilation through the tongue of the sneaker. These ventilation holes on the side of the shoe are basically pinpricks and do nothing. Depending on the version of the Air Jordan 9 that you get in the colorway, the leather is decent. You've got some nubuck, or I guess Durabuck material that's used on the mudguard of the shoe. But the main reason this shoe made the top 10 list is because of the underfoot cushioning setup. You've got a Zoom Air unit in the heel and a Zoom Air unit in the forefoot. And while it's not as soft underfoot as some of the other shoes that we'll talk about later on in the list, it is pretty decent and it's all around a pretty comfortable experience. Like the Air Jordan 8s and some of the other Air Jordans that we'll talk about later on in the list, this shoe features an internal booty construction, which is fine. It's actually easier to put on than some of the other shoes on this list, mainly because the rest of the upper of the shoe is a bit more traditional. But I gotta be honest, the Air Jordan 9 is relatively unexceptional. It's not the best looking shoe on the list, it's definitely not the worst looking shoe on the list, it's not the most comfortable shoe on the list, it's definitely not the least comfortable shoe on the list. It's kind of right there in the middle, just living life, enjoying itself, and it's, you know, if you like the Air Jordan 9, you're probably gonna like this shoe. Still a dope retro, but in terms of Jordan retros, it's just kind of middle of the road. Coming in very fittingly at number 7 is the Air Jordan 7. Even though in a lot of ways the Air Jordan 7 is